And now we'll have a 15-minute intermission.
Hello again, dear viewer, and welcome back to a needlessly long analysis of Walt Disney's musical masterpiece, Fantasia. So right off the bat, some of you might be a bit confused for two reasons. The first is that you clicked on this video without watching part 1 first. If that's you, please hit pause now, go check out the first half by following the link you see in the corner, and then come back and watch this one afterwards. But there's a second reason to be confused that I would start this video with Fantasia's intermission, and that's because if you're like me, the version of the film you grew up with didn't have an intermission. It just skipped straight from the Rite of Spring to the little interlude where Deems Taylor talks to the soundtrack.
Go on, drop the other shoe, will you?
But if you're watching this film on DVD or Disney Plus, you might have noticed several little details by now that weren't on your old VHS copy, and that's because Disney has been modifying the film throughout the years for its various re-releases. Most of the changes have been incidental cuts to trim the runtime, but there is one we need to talk about before we go any further, and it's this shot right here. In the pastoral symphony sequence, when the female centaurs are parading around in front of the boys, one of them briefly stops, looks back with mild annoyance, and then keeps walking. Now, regardless of which version of the film you watch today, this shot will look the same. Just a weird little unexplained reaction to nothing in particular. But if you happen to see the film when it first debuted, you know that she's not just looking at the empty space behind her, but at a character who was edited out of the film for its 1969 release, and who has never since been included on any home video version. That character's name is Sunflower, and she's one of two small centaurettes who were removed from the film for being offensive racial stereotypes. Now, I do not want to traffic in racist imagery on this channel, but I can't wholeheartedly recommend Fantasia without addressing these characters. So, here's Sunflower, and here's Otika. Full-on minstrel caricatures with the same degrading, distasteful, dehumanizing features that have been weaponized against black people for centuries. There's no positive way to interpret Disney's intentions here. This is a joke made exclusively at the expense of a marginalized community, using imagery that was just as harmful in 1940 as it is today. Fantasia was far from the only cartoon of this era to feature characters like this. The history of animation is heavily intertwined with the history of blackface, but the fact that these particular images were erased from a film that has otherwise stood the test of time does present a unique ethical dilemma. When I was younger, I'd often heard that there were black characters cut from this scene, but I thought I owned the original version, so I assumed people were talking about these two. And young viewers today might easily make the same mistake, which Disney seems a little too willing to let happen. The version of the film currently on Disney Plus features a content warning about racial stereotypes, saying that they've chosen to include the offensive material in order to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversation. But while the zebra centaurs are featured in this version, as are the Chinese mushrooms, Sunflower and Otika are still missing, as if Disney is deliberately trying to trick people into thinking they never existed. Now, in Disney's defense, they don't really have any better options here. They could put Sunflower and Otika back in, but preserving history is not the same thing as actively reinserting racist imagery to a place where it's long since been removed, and there's a strong argument that the damage these images might cause to children in general, and black viewers in particular, outweighs the benefit of any conversation they might spark. Then again, removing two of the only named black characters in the first 50 years of your studio's history says just as much about your current prejudice as keeping them in. There are a wide range of nuances and perspectives to consider, but it's a complex topic that I can't really hope to cover here. So for the time being, I'm going to move on as if the official version of Fantasia is the censored one, and do my best to give these issues the attention they deserve in the next episode. Even without Sunflower and Otika, it's generally agreed that the Pastoral Symphony is the weakest segment of the film. The music community felt it wasn't up to the standards of Beethoven, while the animation community felt it wasn't up to the standards of Disney. This mostly comes down to a problem of character design. You look at some of the early concept art and the characters have a real godlike magnificence to them, but somewhere along the way, half of them devolved into goofy, undignified cartoons, completely unworthy of a place on Mount Olympus. The biggest offenders are the centaurs.
And their girlfriends, the centaurettes.
There was talk at first of assigning this sequence to Bill Tytla, who was known for creating strong and powerful characters that would have been right at home with Beethoven, but Disney pulled Tytla to work on Night on Bald Mountain and replaced him with Fred Moore, who had a talent for drawing humans. The centaurs Moore delivered are very impressive in terms of facial expression, but completely lacking from the neck down. They're just regular human teenagers plopped onto monochromatic horse bodies. There's no texture or shading to them, no muscle grooves or imperfections. They just look like when a cast member wears a skin-tone bodysuit in Disneyland. Given this, it's very weird that we see the centaurettes topless. Fantasia was never specifically a kids' film. It has plenty of other explicit scenes, even plenty of other nude scenes. But you take the fact that these girls look more or less like human high schoolers, combine that with the fact that we then watch them getting dressed so we know that modesty exists in this universe, and it just gives the whole thing an awfully creepy vibe. It's also an odd choice to have them pair off romantically by color. I have a lot of questions about how this society works in regards to genetics. So yeah, I'd agree that Pastoral Symphony is the weakest chapter, but it's not bad by any stretch. What it lacks in its characters, it more than makes up for in its backgrounds, with breathtaking landscapes that anticipate the panorama designs of Sleeping Beauty. You truly get a sense that this is a painting come to life, and much like with The Rite of Spring, that was not something anyone had seen before. People knew what a Pegasus looked like, but they didn't know how fast it moved, or how it positioned its wings as it touched down for a landing. The animators had to invent all of that. They had to take centuries of artwork and give it dimension that the Renaissance masters had never attempted, and most of it works beautifully, particularly during the storm that floods the mountain and the return of the sun and renewal of life that follows. Here, the gods of Olympus are finally given the majesty they deserve. Iris with her beautiful rainbow train, Morpheus shrouding the sky with night, Boreas ripping through the trees with his powerful icy breath, knocking poor Bacchus right off his feet. Just a few moments earlier, Bacchus had been on top of the world. Now he's just another typical little man in this universe, humbled yet again by the forces of nature, as the cycle of Fantasia continues. As we near the end of Fantasia, sandwiched right between the gods of Olympus and the demons of Bald Mountain, we get this. Lusty circus animals chasing each other around in a wild midnight orgy. Dance of the Hours is that kind of set piece that comes 3/4 of the way through every musical, where all the plotlines are about to converge and suddenly a supporting character breaks into a pointless comic relief number like Shapoopy or Sit Down You're Rocking the Boat. It's a palate cleanser. It wakes you up and re-energizes you before the finale, but don't think for a moment that that makes it any less of an achievement. In fact, it's one of the film's best segments. The characters, the gags, the lighting, the tempo, everything works together to transform this simple little farce into a burst of pure anarchic joy. I once went to a symphony screening of Fantasia with a live orchestra, and this piece absolutely brought down the house. The audience just couldn't get enough of it. The reason it works so well is because of its commitment to the form. The original ballet by Ponchielli is a lofty, melodramatic affair, and Disney's version basically exists to take the mickey out of it, setting loose an absurd cast of characters into an otherwise po-faced production. Suffice it to say, the music community was not impressed, with critics feeling that such juvenile antics had no place on Ponchielli's great stage, but the dance community loved it. They knew how hard it was to perfect their craft, the years and years of training required just to strike a particular pose, so when they saw ostriches and elephants hitting those poses with the exact same precision, they recognized that Disney's animators were no less dedicated than they. It is a caricature of the ballet, described Disney historian John Culhane, in which not only the subject, temper, and mood of the romantic ballet are parodied, but the basic vocabulary of steps and movements as well. When a human being executes the grand jeté, this big leap is the triumphant achievement of the illusion of weightlessness. When a hippopotamus does the same thing, it is a caricature of that illusion. Only an art of movement could lampoon the triumph of grace over gravity that is the essence of ballet, so the basic joke in Dance of the Hours is based on the nature of the animation medium itself. So Dance of the Hours is not just a parody, but a full-on transgression. It's proving that animation, this youngest and least mature of art forms, is capable of matching the grace and artistry of the greatest ballet company, even with its pants down around its ankles. An elephant gets her foot stuck in a bubble, but refuses to fall out of step. A hippo wears a tutu that conceals almost none of her Rubenesque figure, but still pulls it over her hips with true feminine delicacy. An alligator stands below his lady love ready to be flattened like a pancake, but still remembers to properly position his tail to support himself for the landing. Everything is played completely straight. Even Deems Taylor's introduction gives no indication that we're about to watch a comedy.
Suddenly, the orchestra bursts into a brilliant finale, in which the hours of darkness are overcome by the hours of light.
So yet again, we have a story about the passage of time, and how the forces of good will always return to cast out darkness. Or at least that's what Taylor says, but it seems an odd description here. These themes are present in Dance of the Hours, but they were much more present in Pastoral Symphony, and The Rite of Spring, and Sorcerer's Apprentice, and Nutcracker, and the Toccata and Fugue. If anything, Hours is making a mockery not just of Ponchielli, but of Fantasia itself, reminding us how fundamentally ridiculous it is for a cartoon to deal with such heavy topics. Surely we're not taking this all seriously. Animation is the territory of dopey ducks and wacky wabbits. What could it possibly have to say about the nature of time or the powers of good and evil? Everyone just stop and laugh for a moment. Remember, this is a Disney film. You came here to be entertained. There's no reason to expect anything more. So sit back and relax. Now, on to the finale. This is, in my opinion, the greatest piece of animation ever put to film. On the night of the witches' Sabbath, the dead are summoned from their graves for a profane celebration atop Bald Mountain. Souls spanning thousands of years are pulled up from the earth to join in the dance. Executed criminals rise through their nooses. Former churchgoers abandon the sacred ground meant to protect them. Tearing across the screen, each spirit seems to come from a different world, as if every depiction of hell throughout history has come together on this one night. Awaiting their arrival is the mighty demon Chernabog, a figure of unadulterated evil luxuriating in his own power. In his hands, beautiful seductresses turn to cloven-hoofed beasts, writhing and undulating to please their master. With a snarl, he smothers them in the inferno below, while others crawl towards him like maggots on rotten meat, soaking up what they can of his power before they too are cast into the flames. There's truly something sinister in the celluloid here. Disney has given us many great villains, but none at the level of such utter depravity as these. None who show such disregard for the sanctity of flesh or the laws of any higher power. The violent and sexual imagery paired with the unstoppable momentum of the music gives this sequence a life all its own, as if the animators had no more control over this scene than Mickey had over his broomsticks. And as the demons howl together in savage reverie, it appears that there is no force on Earth that could possibly stop them. But of course, all bad things must come to an end. With the sound of the church bells comes the arrival of the dawn, and lightness once again returns to cast out the dark. The demons slink back to their graves, while Chernabog, looking very much like a certain conductor we know, drops his arms and brings the music to a close. And a new song begins, Schubert's Ave Maria, as we look out across the land and see the forces of good return to take control. Monks sing on their way to church, holding radiant lanterns to banish any evil that remains, and we, the audience, gaze on from a distance, taking in the beauty of a world restored. There's none of the chaos or frantic editing that fueled the previous sequence, just a single continuous shot of goodness and purity enduring, stronger even in their simplest form than all the theatricality of evil. And thus the film has told its story, one of light and darkness and light again, one of ambition and humility, mountains and valleys, a rise to power, a fall from grace, one of time passing through nature, the cycle of a day, a season, a year, a billion years, peaceful lands being overtaken by monsters and then wiped clean again, shadows that suggest the shape of evil while hiding its true features, and reflections that reveal the truth, naked and beautiful in the light of day. The Ave Maria is a simple and elegant way to end the film, not to mention a very ambitious one. The horizontal multiplane shot that captured this sequence was the longest and most complex Disney had ever attempted, requiring the team to work in perfect unison as they slowly moved each panel over 118 feet of film. The slightest mistimed motion would have rendered all their work useless, and it took so long to get it perfect that the sequence was only completed 2 days before the film's premiere. That said, I don't know if this achievement really comes across for modern viewers. It's a lovely scene, but following Bald Mountain it is a little underwhelming, and many have criticized this finale for making evil look so spectacular that good comes across as weak, even in victory. But I think that's missing the point, because Fantasia isn't about good triumphing over evil. At least, not permanently. Evil isn't vanquished here. It crawls back to its hiding place, but it will return next year and start its dance all over again. And this has been true throughout the film. Midnight turns back to dawn, winter surrenders to spring, storms are swept away by sunshine, giants rise and fall, music crescendos, then fades, and the apprentice is humbled, but still dreams of one day becoming the master. These aren't stories, they're ecosystems, seesawing back and forth in a quest for perfect balance. With Snow White, Disney had illustrated the power of goodness, and with Pinocchio, that of evil. But in the world of Fantasia, both must always coexist. Just as light needs darkness, the hero needs a villain, and sound needs picture, even if the music snobs refuse to admit it. Fantasia is the embodiment of that union, the synchronization of all art forms into one, created not for the elites, but for the masses, who perhaps lacked the patience to stare at a stationary orchestra for 2 hours. Disney himself was not a fan of classical music, and made Fantasia as a means of understanding its appeal. "I never liked this stuff," he said. "Honest, I just couldn't listen to it. But I can listen to it now. It seems to mean a little more to me. Maybe it can give other people the same thing." And it did. For many young viewers, Fantasia is their first introduction to classical music, and in their minds, the images and songs will remain tied together forever. It was never going to be the revolutionary cinema experience Disney had pictured, and he probably always knew that. It was far too ambitious for its own good. But for one shining moment, Walt Disney stood atop the same mountain as Beethoven, Da Vinci, and Shakespeare, controlling heaven, hell, and everything in between. And when the film inevitably failed, it was worth the fall, just for the chance to rise again. Or at least, it would have been, if not for one tiny little detail. Fantasia didn't fail. At least, not permanently. Sure, it flopped when it was first released, but that was just the beginning. Walt could see by 1940 that his empire was growing beyond box office receipts, and he'd learned how to build his brand, merchandising characters and songs and colorizing old cartoons to resell for new audiences. He knew that if he made something good enough, sooner or later it would turn a profit, and sure enough, Fantasia eventually found its fans. Through the years, it developed a cult status, especially after college students in the 60s rediscovered its psychedelic potential, and with 10 major re-releases since its first premiere, it now stands as the 23rd highest-grossing film in history. So Disney didn't bite off more than he could chew. He just invested in the value of his own art. He knew he was ready to stand alongside the masters, so he placed his bet on the table and waited for history to prove him right. And he didn't just win, he dominated. He created a vision of hell more daunting than Dante, a painting more magnificent than Michelangelo, a ballet more graceful than La Gioconda. He invented new methods of abstract storytelling, improved on the science of the most advanced academics, captured the beauty of nature like no one before or since, and best of all, he took 8 of the greatest pieces of music ever written, pulled them down from their elitist shelves, and passed them out to all the simple-minded folk like himself, who never realized that the fine arts could be for them. The Apprentice surpassed the Masters. The name of Disney has become far bigger than that of any artist that preceded him, standing alone atop the mountains of art and commerce, laughing in the face of his competition even decades after his death. Of course, he won't go on laughing forever. Someday a new master will rise to take his place, and the slate will be wiped clean once again. But until then, we'll always be able to look up at Sorcerer Mickey triumphantly conducting fireworks across the night sky and remember the corn-fed cartoonist from Kansas City who conquered the entire world in one fell swoop. And that, dear viewer, is why, in our search for the greatest Disney animated feature of all time, Fantasia comes in second place. Here's the thing. Fantasia is my favorite Disney movie. It's also my favorite animated movie and quite possibly my favorite movie, period. But that's not the only metric I'm looking at here. My hope for this series is that it will eventually feel like one body of work, and as such, where each film ranks is a commentary not just on that film, but on all the others as well. The film at the top should be the one that best represents what I look for from Disney, and by that standard I think there are two reasons not to give it to Fantasia. One, we've already discussed, but the other is that, in all honesty, I'm kinda glad Fantasia flopped. I wouldn't want to see a new concert feature every year. That sounds exhausting, and highly impractical from a business standpoint. They would inevitably have been lightened up, watered down, defanged, declawed, and pushed out on an assembly line like so many other Disney properties these days. But to have just one weird little outlier like this in your history, I think that's kind of exciting. We all think we know what we're getting when we sit down for a Disney movie, and we love that feeling. It's safe and warm and magical. But there's also always just a little hint of doubt. A lingering suspicion that maybe, just maybe, this time they won't play it safe. Maybe this time they'll give us something we're not ready for. Something that completely knocks us off our feet and changes the way we watch movies forever. Because if they can make a film like Fantasia, who knows what other tricks they've got up their sleeve. So no, I don't want to give Fantasia the top spot. Because as much as I love watching this film and thinking of all that Disney could be, there's another film still to come that stands for everything Disney should be. A film that makes you say, okay, this is Disney. This is what happens when a drawing on a page reaches into your heart and lifts it up to the heavens. That's the film I want to champion. And I'm very excited to tell you why. So stick around. I'll see you next time.
Well, so long. I'll be seeing you.
Goodbye.